one of the sets of books that I had had as a childhood that didn't make it into our adulthood included the Sneetches, which itself included the story of the Zacks, which I have now ordered, and it is actually available, but I don't have it yet, so I only have the text for it. So there's nothing to show here, Zach, except that I'm just going to read this remarkable story, originally published in 1961, that people even who love Dr. Seuss may not be fully familiar with. One day, making tracks in the prairie of Prax, came a north-going Zax and a south-going Zax, and it happened that both of them came to a place where they bumped. There they stood, foot to foot, face to face. "Look here now," the north-going Zax said. "I say, you are blocking my path. You are right in my way. I'm a north-going Zax, and I always go north. Get out of my way now and let me go forth." "Who's in whose way?" snapped the south-going Zax. "I always go south, making south-going tracks. So you're in my way, and I ask you to move, and let me go south in my south-going groove." Then the north-going Zax puffed his chest up with pride. "I never," he said, "take a step to one side, and I'll prove to you that I won't change my ways if I have to keep standing here 59 days. "And I'll prove to you," yelled the south-going Zax, "that I can stand here in the prairie of Prax for 59 years, for I live by a rule that I learned as a boy back in south-going school. Never budge, that's my rule, never budge in the least. Not an inch to the west, not an inch to the east. I'll stay here, not budging I can and I will, if it makes you and me and the whole world stand still." Well, of course, the world didn't stand still. The world grew. In a couple of years, the new highway came through, and they built it right there over those two stubborn Zacks and left them there standing unbudged in their tracks. Just
somehow, I think I've never heard that.
Yeah, it was one of my favorites. So my father, as I remember it, read One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish a lot to me when I was very young, and then one of his two favorite books to read to me as a child. One of them is not Dr. Seuss, but one of them was Green Eggs and Ham, and the other was Ferdinand, the story of the bull who was too sensitive for the job to which he has apparently been born, who likes to sniff flowers rather than fight other bulls to the death. So the Zacks is exactly, as we've been talking for months now, for tens of episodes, dozens of episodes, indicative of the problem of simple rules that you are told by an authority and that you cannot waver from, even in the face of a situation which clearly warrants it.
Yep, we do a good job.
Who?
I'm looking for a moniker that fits. Those of us in the We Remember How to Think social group do a good job of pointing out the importance of nuance. But I think what you're saying is that actually nuance is a companion of dynamism. And,
yes.
That these two things are really what we're talking about. And, we've talked elsewhere about the hazard of fixed rules with respect to raising children or governance, that fixed rules get gamed, and therefore what you need is discretion built into systems. But that is clearly evident in many, many Seuss stories.
Yeah. And in fact, related to that, which it's not in my notes here for today, but another value and virtue that we have talked about a lot, and that I, from the very beginning of running those study abroad trips that I did, and then that we did in the end, is the value of serendipity, of leaving yourself open enough that you can find yourself in a situation where you could be surprised, where not everything that happens to you is predetermined or pre-imagined, either of those things. And how can you experience serendipity by putting yourself in situations that you're unfamiliar with, and how can you be open enough to receive the values of that serendipity when it happens? Well, you have to not be operating by these simple rubrics. I heard that. If I go outside my house, I must wear a mask. I'm not sure exactly what that simple rubric will do to, block serendipity, but certainly it impinges our humanity, not being able to walk around outside alone in nature without a mask, for instance.
So the thing about serendipity, I think, is also close kin to the idea that the fact of something having value is not necessarily connected to your ability to describe what that value is, right? That there is, the pursuit of serendipity involves going somewhere or engaging in something and not knowing why. And I think one of the things that is very clear. And you raise it in the beginning, your beginning comments about the idea that, a tepid defense of Seuss is that these are just fun kid stories. Right?
Yes.
No, they are not.
Right.
These are both serious stories, and what people don't get is that the purpose of childhood, you and I know this very, very well, because evolutionarily this is an obvious fact in some ways, as much as many people in the area miss it. The fact of our very long childhoods is about the complexity of our adulthoods. It's about building adults who can handle it, right? And so Seuss, whether he was explicitly aware of this or not, was very much about creating adults with capacity. And so those stories recede into history. You go years without thinking about them sometimes. But they also, as I allude to in that poem, are in us. And one thing that I was shocked about, I would say in my life, I have written 2 poems that I regard as significant enough to remember where I've put them, let's say. Okay. One of them was about the telomere work.
Yep.
And the other one was this one.
Incidentally, that poem that you wrote about the telomere work was very well received by Dick Alexander, your advisor and one of my mentors.
Who also
graduate advisor.
Wrote poetry.
Yes, he did.
I would say, for my part, I can't write a serious poem, but I can write an ironic poem, right? But here's what I discovered in writing this.
Oh, I don't think that distinction is right. I think the poem you just read to us is serious.
Oh, but I'm not saying it isn't serious. Goofing off is serious business, right? So here's the interesting thing. Yeah. So I wrote the telomere poem in 1998, I think.
Yeah.
I did not realize at the time that it was Seussian, right? And it is.
In what way? You're not speaking merely of the meter, presumably?
The meter, the cadences, the license, there's a lot in it that is actually implicitly Seussian.
At some level, all of us who use the English language a lot and with some creativity and, who were exposed to any Seuss growing up, as most English-speaking kids who were exposed to books at all were exposed to Seuss growing up, are downstream of Seuss, and so therefore have onboarded some of the Seussian thinking and cadence, and that's part of why there is objection to it. It's so ubiquitous.
This is what I'm getting at, is that this stuff is actually so deeply written into our linguistic software that it actually comes out in ways that we have no idea we owe to this pathway. Okay. And so the fact that if you were to compare this new poem, which I think it took 2 hours to put it together. It just sort of very naturally emerged.
And it's called Let Loose the Seuss?
Let Loose the Seuss.
All right.
If you compare that to the other poem on the optimism of aging gerontologists, you will find that they actually they're unmistakably linked in the way that they function. But anyway, my point is, all right, there's a tremendous amount of profit to the little linguistic games that Theodor Geisel put us to, that caused us to build circuitry that we use all the time, have no idea it came from him. And that this now, at the point that Seuss is under attack, right, because of woke nonsense, it suddenly comes flowing out, and you're just amazed at how actually easy it is. That stuff, it's very deeply wired in. So in part, my point is, those books are for children. They are about creating adults with high capacity. And therefore, the idea of canceling them is more of the same. It's of the same sort as deciding that math is no good. And so anyway, we will get there, of course, but the discovery of how deeply wired in that stuff is something that I think it is worth investigating. In fact, I would say anybody for whom Seuss was important should sit down and just try to write a few verses and see if it ain't there.